Welcome to the podcast. Today we're talking about Indonesia's grid is breaking. Let's begin.
Have you noticed the power situation in Java lately? It's pretty, I feel like, wild rolling blackouts across basically the whole island.
Yeah, I've been hearing about it. Which areas are getting hit the hardest?
It's pretty widespread. Jakarta, Metro, West Java, Central Java, East Java, Yogyakarta, even Bali. But Surabaya and Pasuruan seem to be taking it especially rough.
Correct. That's kind of a lot of ground. What's the pattern like? Are people just sitting in the dark all day?
Not exactly. It's rotating outages, so the blackouts shift between regions. Each one lasts maybe 3 to 6 hours, but it keeps coming back.
3 to 6 hours at a time, on repeat. That's going to wreck daily routines. What's PLN saying about it?
They're calling it system reinforcement work and say they're doing it in a measured way to keep the grid safe. They've apologized, but it doesn't really make the inconvenience any easier to deal with.
Right. Measured doesn't exactly comfort you when your power's out for half a day. Makes sense they'd frame it that way, though.
Yeah, but the real debate is over what's actually causing all this. The government keeps insisting it's just technical disruptions and that coal supplies are perfectly fine.
So they're blaming equipment failures? That feels like a convenient excuse when millions are losing power.
Exactly. An expert from ITB points out that the grid actually has a 30% reserve margin. Under normal circumstances, equipment issues shouldn't knock out the lights unless the backup capacity is unavailable.
And it's unavailable because?
Because the fuel just isn't there. Some power plants are running on less than 5 days of coal stock, way below the 20-day standard. Plus, there's an 18 to 20 million ton gap in PLN's contracts for this year.
Wait, nearly 20 million tons missing? That sounds like a massive supply problem, not a minor technical glitch.
It really is, and it's tied to bureaucratic delays in budget approvals since April, which have directly impacted fuel availability. So while officials say everything is under control, the plants are literally running on fumes.
That's a huge disconnect. You've got the government saying safe and sufficient, while experts are warning about critically low stocks. It makes you wonder who's actually looking at the real numbers.
And that's exactly where it gets worse. You've got this coal shortage, and then El Niño shows up and basically doubles down on the problem.
How does weather make a coal shortage worse?
Well, El Niño brings higher temperatures, so everyone cranks up the AC. Demand spikes. At the same time, less rain means hydroelectric plants can't produce as much power. So you're losing supply on one side while demand surges on the other.
So hydroelectric was supposed to literally be a buffer?
Exactly. Normally, hydro could help absorb some of the shortfall, but with reservoirs running low, that safety net basically disappears. It's like kicking the grid when it's already down.
That's brutal timing. The coal stocks are critically low, and then climate hits and squeezes everything at once.
Yeah, it turns what might have been a manageable supply gap into a full-blown crisis. And the worst part? El Niño is predictable, so planners should have seen this coming.
Right, which makes the whole situation even more frustrating. You had warning signs on multiple fronts, and nothing was done to prepare.
And to make matters worse, you've got El Niño hitting at the exact same time. It's basically acting as a climate multiplier for the whole crisis.
How does a weather pattern make a coal shortage worse?
Well, El Niño brings higher temperatures, so everyone cranks up the AC. Electricity demand spikes. But at the same time, the extended dry season means less rain. So hydroelectric plants can't generate as much power.
So you're losing supply on one side while demand surges on the other?
Exactly. Hydroelectric was supposed to be a buffer that could help absorb the coal shortage. But with reservoirs running low, that safety net just disappears.
That's brutal timing. The grid is already stressed from the fuel gap, and then climate hits and squeezes everything at once.
Yeah, it turns what might have been a manageable supply problem into a full-blown crisis. And the frustrating part is that El Niño is predictable, so planners should have seen this double pressure coming.
Right, which makes the whole situation even more avoidable. You had warning signs on multiple fronts, and nothing was done to prepare.
And that disconnect is about to get even worse because of El Niño. It's basically acting as a climate multiplier for the whole crisis.
Exactly. And that disconnect isn't just about weather. It's baked into how the government is talking about this whole situation. You had the energy minister back on June 18 publicly saying, in Ciala, no outages would happen. Then the lights went out anyway.
Right, and he didn't just say that once. He went further and claimed there was no problem overall. He pointed to the 134 million tons of contracted coal out of 154 million needed, and basically dismissed the remaining 18 to 20 million ton gap as manageable.
But that's the thing. The gap isn't just a number on paper. Some plants are running on less than 5 days of coal when they should have 20.
Right.
So when a minister says no problem while power plants are literally running on fumes, it feels like either he's not getting the full picture or he's choosing not to see it.
That's what makes it so frustrating. The repeated assurances keep getting contradicted by reality on the ground, and it's not just about electricity anymore, it's about credibility. If people can't trust the official word, how are they supposed to prepare?
And the more the same story gets broadcast without any real resolution, the more it signals that this isn't a temporary glitch. It's a persistent problem that nobody seems willing to fully acknowledge.
Yeah, and if it's truly persistent, you'd expect the system to have some way of handling it. But looking at how the grid is actually supposed to work, there are built-in buffers that should prevent this from spiraling.
Right, like the reserve margin. For Java and Bali, the standard is 30%, which translates to about 9 to 10 gigawatts of ready capacity. That buffer is literally designed to absorb equipment failures or transmission issues without the lights going out.
So if that buffer exists, why are we still seeing these rotating blackouts?
Because that capacity sorta isn't actually available. The plants are being derated, intentionally running at around 60% of their maximum output just to conserve whatever fuel they have left. So when a force outage hits, which is just a sudden equipment or transmission failure, there's no spare capacity to pick up the slack.
That's wild. So the backup system is essentially hollowed out because they're trying to stretch the coal they do have.
Exactly. And once you're in that position, load control becomes the only option left. Those rotating outages aren't some planned inconvenience. They're a last resort to stop the entire grid from collapsing.
It really kind of puts the minister's no problem comment in a different light. He's looking at contracted tons on paper while the actual operational capacity is being gutted by fuel stress.
Yeah. And that disconnect between the numbers on a spreadsheet and what's happening inside the power plants is exactly why the technical side of this crisis matters, so I feel like much.
It really does. And that's what makes this feel less like a single failure and more like a systemic problem. All these pieces, the coal supply, the budget approvals, the weather, they're all feeding into each other.
Right. It's almost like a chain reaction. You've got bureaucratic delays with the RAB approvals starting back in April, which then directly impacts fuel availability. And on top of that, El Niño hits at the worst possible time.
So the climate isn't the root cause, but it's definitely making everything worse.
Exactly. It's acting as a threat multiplier. The grid was already stressed, and then you get higher demand from all the AC use while hydroelectric output drops because of less rain. It's a double squeeze.
And underneath all of this, there's the bigger question of how reliant Indonesia still is on coal, especially with domestic quality declining.
Yeah, that energy transition tension is real. You're trying to maintain energy security while the world is shifting away from fossil fuels, and your domestic coal is getting harder to work with. It highlights just how vulnerable the current setup is.
It makes you wonder if fixing the immediate crisis is enough, or if these underlying vulnerabilities are just going to show up again next time.
That's the real question, isn't it? Because if the system keeps looking stable on paper while all these pressures build up underneath, the next shock could hit even harder.
And it's not just the technical side, is it? It feels like all these different problems are feeding into each other.
Yeah, that's what makes it so tricky. You've got the coal supply issues, but then you layer on top of that the bureaucratic delays with the RABI approvals since April. Administrative processes having real-world consequences for whether people have power.
Right, and then El Niño hits. It's not the root cause, but it's definitely making everything worse.
Exactly. Climate acting as a threat multiplier. More heat means more demand, less rain means less hydropower. It's squeezing the grid from both sides at the worst possible time.
And underneath all of this is the bigger question of Indonesia's reliance on coal, especially with domestic quality declining.
Yeah, that energy transition tension is real. You're trying to maintain energy security while the world shifts away from fossil fuels, and your domestic coal is getting harder to work with.
It makes you wonder if fixing the immediate crisis is enough, or if these underlying vulnerabilities are just going to show up again.
That's the real question. Because if the system keeps looking stable on paper, while not going to lie, all these pressures build up underneath, the next shock could hit even harder.
Wait, what? And honestly, that's what keeps nagging at me. How much of this do we actually know versus what's just being told to us? There are so many gaps in the picture.
Okay, right. Like we still don't really know which power plants are critically low on coal or how many of them we're talking about. Some PLTU is pretty vague when you're trying to gauge how close the whole system is to the edge.
Exactly. And nobody's given a straight answer on why the RABI approvals got delayed back in April. Was it bureaucracy, budget constraints, something else? That delay seems to be the domino that started everything, yet it's barely explained.
Correct. Plus, there's the bigger uncertainty around El Niño itself. We know it's predicted to bring an extended dry season, but no one's saying exactly how long or how severe.
Seriously?
If it stretches longer than expected, the whole situation gets worse.
And what about the economic toll? We've got businesses and industries sitting through hours of blackouts, but there's zero data on what that's actually costing. That feels like a huge blind spot.
It does. And then you've got the government's contingency plan, or lack of one. Beyond vague kind of coordination with PLN, there's no clear roadmap for closing that 18 to 20 million ton coal gap. It makes you wonder if they're as worried as they should be.
So we're left with a crisis where the timeline, the scope, and even the response plan are all fuzzy. That's not exactly reassuring for anyone trying to plan around it.
No, it's not. And until those questions get answered, the real risk is that we're just managing symptoms while the actual problems stay hidden.